Canon 10D, visiting from 2003, 6 megapixels, a perfectly good camera, although mine is not in particularly good shape. And in place of a lens, I'm using electrical tape with a tiny hole in it. This is me constructing my DIY pinhole lens, but of course it's not a lens, really. It doesn't fit the definition. No bending of light, no focusing, no optical elements of any kind. It's just a tiny aperture. But sure, it fills the role of a lens in this scenario, so pinhole lens, that's fine. We'll go with that. And with some help, I tried to calculate this. In terms of field of view and f-stop, this setup is roughly equivalent to a 44mm f147 lens. But considering this is an APS-C camera that I'm using, I'm getting a field of view equivalent to 70mm on full frame. I'm also shooting completely blind. There is absolutely no image visible in the viewfinder with which to compose, but that's okay, actually. It's honestly pretty fun to shoot that way. I don't feel particularly restrained shooting blind. What does feel a little restrictive is using a tripod, but it's necessary. I can't crank up the ISO very far on this 10D, so long exposures it is. Also, yes, the sensor is absolutely filthy, but from my way of thinking, that only enhances what I'm doing with the camera right now. The unpredictable nature of it all. The utter honesty of the way the images have earned all of their rough edges and imperfections, flaws, idiosyncrasies. It feels great. It's fun. It washes the boredom away. This sort of thing is exactly why I don't feel burned out, shooting in the same damn locations all the time and making these videos. If you're into photography, how can you not be giddy doing stuff like this? Indulging your every creative whim. At least the ones that don't cost a great deal of money. The pinhole lens cost $0.0 American. And the 10D costs practically nothing. It's been sitting in a box of junk for 6 months now. On and off. I pulled it out of the box a couple of times, but I bought it supposedly in working condition for $39.50 US. But it wasn't. I returned it, quote, but they didn't want the camera back, so I just got my money back, which ordinarily I'd be afraid of breaking a camera. I wouldn't work on it myself, but it was free and it was already broken, so there was literally nothing to lose. And miraculously, I actually got it going again. I took it out for a day of shooting. I was shooting raw, and the camera is quite slow shooting raw, viewing your images back after you've shot them. When you try, the camera just grinds to a halt. And if you make the mistake of hitting the play button while it's still recording a raw file, you might as well just break for lunch or something. So I didn't bother looking at anything I was shooting. I just trusted my experience, and I trusted the light meter, which doesn't work, thus ruining virtually every shot. They were all overexposed by 4 or 5 stops, easily, I'd say. It was kind of heartbreaking, so into the junk box it went. The camera not to be trusted. And I'm redoing my tape here because I want to explore the idea of shooting with multiple pinholes. I was thinking 3 or 5, but I went with 3. I'm expecting multiple images overlaid on top of each other, but instead I got this harsh line. And I did another test shot toward the sun. Still have that harsh line. I don't know, is this an artifact of multiple images being laid on top of each other, but maybe the holes are too far apart? I don't know. I honestly struggled to wrap my mind around the results I was getting, and I just decided to move on with the intention of revisiting the idea later, putting the holes a little bit closer together. For now, I'm excited to try telephoto. I brought some various materials with me, toilet paper roll, and the paper towel roll. I didn't look any of this stuff up, you understand. That's not really my way of doing things. I really like just the experimentation of it all. Seems like it would magnify the image, but I was mostly concerned about how long these exposures were going to have to be. But it wasn't really a problem, and I'm definitely getting some magnification. And a bit of a light leak, though it's just erasing all detail, which is kinda neat, I guess. It's definitely something. The results are interesting, but it's not quite so compelling. I didn't feel inclined to continue on for a long time. I missed the simplicity and the results of the other approach. But when I decided I wanted to try some pinhole photography, I didn't want to risk any of my other camera bodies getting dust in the sensor, bits of tape, bits of foil, whatever material. So I figured if I just stick to shooting JPEGs and I absolutely ignore the light meter, I should be fine. Given my affinity for DSLRs from this period, it's notable, I think, that I never owned this camera, nor did I use it for any professional work. Although it seemed like everyone around me at the time, when it was the current model, owned it, shot it professionally. So I got to mess around with it here and there, but I was shooting a 1D and I was very happy with my 1D. And I never harbored any secret longing to own this camera. But when I saw the ridiculously low price they're going for these days, roughly equivalent to the amount I spend on frozen berries over the course of a few weeks, I had to grab one. Funny though, I do enjoy shooting it a lot more than I expected. But unlike a lot of the older DSLRs I shoot, this one feels old, feels sluggish. Image quality, though, is quite good. Also, shooting JPEG and JPEG alone is kind of thrilling. I shoot JPEG a lot, but always JPEG plus RAW. So I always have a proverbial safety net. Not this time. Anyway, this camera and I got off to a bad start. The worst of starts. But we're going to give it another go. The camera and I. It seemed a perfect match for this experiment. And shooting this way, viewfinderless, turns every scene into a question, and my job is to find a compelling answer amongst the many possible answers. Kind of makes me feel like a beginner in that way, and that's something I always strive for, because as a beginner I had no baggage. Everything was pure experimentation, and finding that mindset again when I can is just beautiful. But the concept of pinhole optics goes back ridiculously far, predates even the earliest, most rudimentary cameras by literally thousands of years. So by the time photography was invented, with light-sensitive materials that could store an image with some degree of permanence, lenses and optics were already well understood. Telescopes, microscopes, they had been around for centuries. So why would anyone shoot a pinhole lens? Why would they do it then? Why would I do it now? Well, I could speculate, I suppose, but no thanks. In my case, though, I just want to. That's basically it. Sounded like fun. And it turns out, yes, it definitely is. It's a lot of fun. And now that I've spent a bit of time doing it, I would also describe it as very peaceful. Working with these tools forces you into a charming pace. Every shot feels like this quiet, serene negotiation. I would also describe it as extremely hands-on. The most handsy-onsiest of photography experiences that I've ever had, probably. More so even than shooting film. From my perspective anyway. Granted, you could pair the idea of pinhole optics with film, and then even more hands-on still. I don't think I could handle that currently, because I do have other interests outside of photography. Sleeping, for example. So I'm switching to the R5 now, because I would very much like to ditch the tripod. I feel comfortable with all of this. I don't think I'm going to damage a camera doing this. And with the R5, I can crank the ISO, I can use in-body image stabilization, should make it extremely possible. Easy, in fact, to handhold all of these shots. And now I've got a viewfinder. Maybe that'll ruin the experience, I don't know, but honestly, I can't wait to find out. liked what we were doing, but let's change it up. Let's keep it interesting. Making my own tools rather than buying them is invigorating, and doing so in such a crude and improvised way, and quickly is key. Such a primitive tool, arrived at in such a primitive way, there's just no better feeling, and the images it produces are just as crude, just as primitive, and I love it. Gathering light with nothing but the tiny hole that I've poked in this piece of tape. It's immensely and intensely satisfying. And although, as mentioned, the first photographers did indeed have lenses, I still feel this strong connection to the past shooting this way. That's something I'm always trying to achieve, but it's actually quite rare to get there. But if someone built their own camera at home a couple hundred years ago, they'd have been capturing images with a great deal of aesthetic similarity to what I'm getting here. And this puts me in a very 1800s kind of mindset. But, yes, to be fair, the thought that early photographers would have been using pinhole lenses any more than we would be today isn't really historically accurate. But there is an association in my brain with this look that triggers an emotional response, and finding those sorts of associations and exploiting them is pretty key, I would say, if you're the type of person that feels compelled to do art stuff. So I'm doing the triple holes again, and it's actually working this time, although it's very subtle, and I think this is why the holes seem to want to close now that there are 3 of them. I think they're all pulling on each other. And so maybe tape is not the best material for a multi-hold approach. Do you prefer a multi-hold approach? I've yet to make up my mind, personally. I'm digging the 3 suns, though. I feel like creativity is coming into play, even at the stage of just choosing my tools. That feels pretty great. And yes, of course, making them myself, but I've already covered that. But I mean, the choice of what to pair with what. Is this a guitar song with saxophone? Is it a piano song with trombone? Or is it a 10D song with pinhole optics? Now it's an R5 song. Ancient raw methods meet early 21st century digital camera technology. And the child they have together, is it beautiful? I think it is. But it's interesting, at the very least. It's kind of a choice based on my own convenience, but that's okay. I am allowed to avoid being inconvenienced if I choose to. It doesn't invalidate my art. Oh wait, it does invalidate my art? Well, shit. So I'm trying to build another telephoto lens. And for the R5, I have various adapters, extension tubes. So I'm kind of building my own pinhole interchangeable lens system. Couldn't get this to work, though. I'm getting horrendous light leaks. And other than just like a vague, out of focus line, I never saw any image form. So, we're trying the 3 holes, but with a new material. The R5 looks so dainty compared to old DSLRs. But fun. This is pure fun for me. And the weird ritual of creation. God, I love it. Working without a script. Hey, Miyako. And I mean that metaphorically. I'm not referring to the logistics of making a video. Well, maybe I am. For example, I didn't know what video I was making when I started this. I brought multiple cameras with me. I was thinking I might be doing pinhole, and if so, I want to do it on the 10D, but I also might be doing some shutter dragging or multi-exposures or just abstract stuff in general. But I do think I prefer the single hole for pinhole photography. The 3 holes can come across a little gimmicky, but that may also be my own fault, that I just haven't utilized it in a very clever way. So I keep oscillating back and forth. I usually feel like I'm out here trying to tame the chaos, but With this type of approach, letting the chaos in is essential. Both approaches have value, but today is a chaos-friendly day. I am digging these, can I call them multi-exposures? That's not exactly what they are. These overlaid triple hole images, I'm digging them a bit more. Why not? We'll throw in some shutter dragging, some intentional camera movement. It's always a favorite technique of mine. Pairs beautifully with Pinhole Lens. Just lower your ISO and you have to do a long exposure. So no ND filter is necessary. This is super interesting. I was clearly stalking a shot here. But like I didn't fire the shutter here. This looks like a cool shot. I didn't fire the shutter here. This one I like as well. Also didn't fire the shutter. And yet I came home with this photo, for which I don't have video. I normally don't get my wires crossed that much. That was bizarre. But sometimes I have a vision, sometimes I let go, shoot via instinct. Shaping this, whatever this is that I'm doing in real time. No map, just wandering, making choices. Reflecting on my hopes and fears, rather than thinking too much about what I'm actually doing, physically, with the camera. Trusting that I'll get something interesting. Or at least that I'll fail in an unconventional way. So I needn't worry about the excruciating minutiae of the photography itself.